Why you must leave an avoidant partner. At first, loving an avoidant partner can feel deeply confusing instead of obviously painful. They often seem calm, independent, emotionally mysterious, and even emotionally mature in the beginning. They may tell you they value peace, space, and emotional stability more than drama or conflict. And because they usually avoid intense emotional expression early on, you may mistake emotional distance for emotional strength. But over time, something inside the relationship starts feeling emotionally unbalanced and exhausting. You begin noticing that no matter how much love, patience, or reassurance you give them, the emotional connection never feels completely safe or secure for very long. Every time intimacy begins growing deeper, they suddenly pull away emotionally without clearly explaining why. And this is what slowly breaks people who love avoidant partners. Not always obvious cruelty, not always screaming or chaos, but emotional inconsistency that quietly destroys emotional safety over time. One moment, they seem loving, attentive, and emotionally connected to you. The next moment, they become distant, cold, distracted, or emotionally unavailable without warning. You start feeling like you are constantly trying to reconnect with someone who keeps emotionally disappearing whenever things become too real. And eventually, you begin blaming yourself for the distance they create. You wonder if you became too emotional, too needy, or too attached. You start monitoring your words carefully just to avoid pushing them away again. You become afraid that expressing your emotional needs will make them withdraw even more. This is where the relationship slowly becomes emotionally unhealthy. Because instead of feeling free to express yourself honestly, you begin shrinking your emotions to protect the relationship from collapsing. You stop asking for reassurance even when you desperately need it. You stop bringing up problems because every difficult conversation feels emotionally exhausting. You stop expecting consistency because disappointment has become normal, and without realizing it, you slowly abandon your own emotional needs just to maintain connection with them. That is one of the biggest dangers of loving an avoidant partner for too long. You lose yourself while trying not to lose them. Avoidant partners are not always bad people. Many of them are deeply wounded individuals carrying unresolved emotional pain from childhood or past relationships. Many learned very early in life that vulnerability was unsafe or overwhelming. So instead of leaning into emotional closeness, they learn to emotionally disconnect whenever intimacy feels threatening. But understanding their wounds does not erase the damage caused by the relationship dynamic. And this is the mistake many empathetic people make for years. They become so focused on understanding the avoidant person's pain that they completely ignore the pain happening inside themselves. You tell yourself they just need more time. You tell yourself they are scared of intimacy. You tell yourself their distance is not personal. And maybe some of that is true. But your emotional needs still matter. Your loneliness inside the relationship still matters. Your emotional exhaustion still matters. A relationship cannot survive on understanding alone. It also requires emotional effort, consistency, communication, and emotional presence from both people. And this is where many avoidant relationships become deeply destructive over time. The emotionally available partner keeps carrying the emotional weight for both people. They become the one initiating difficult conversations, repairing emotional distance, and maintaining connection. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner often continues emotionally withdrawing whenever responsibility or vulnerability increases. Eventually, you begin living in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. You never fully know where you stand with them emotionally. You never feel completely chosen, emotionally secure, or prioritized consistently. And that uncertainty slowly creates anxiety inside you that was not there before. You start overthinking small changes in their behavior. You analyze text messages, tone changes, and emotional shifts constantly. You become hyper-aware of emotional distance because you are always trying to prevent abandonment. And this is the painful irony of avoidant relationships. The more emotionally unavailable they become, the more emotionally desperate and anxious you often become. Over time, this dynamic can completely damage your emotional health and self-esteem. Because no matter how much you give, the relationship rarely feels emotionally fulfilling in a stable and lasting way. There comes a point where you must ask yourself a difficult but necessary question. How long are you willing to emotionally suffer while waiting for someone to become available? Because love alone cannot heal someone who refuses to confront their emotional avoidance. And no amount of patience can force someone to develop emotional intimacy before they are ready. This is why leaving an avoidant partner sometimes becomes necessary for your survival and emotional well-being. Not because you stop loving them, but because constantly chasing emotional connection is destroying your peace. At some point, you realize that relationships should not constantly feel like emotional deprivation. You should not have to beg someone to communicate consistently. You should not feel lonely while lying next to someone who claims to love you. And you should not constantly question whether your emotional needs are too much. Healthy love does not make you feel emotionally abandoned every time intimacy increases. Healthy love does not punish vulnerability with distance and silence. Healthy love creates emotional safety instead of emotional confusion. The hardest part about leaving an avoidant partner is that they often show flashes of the person you desperately wish they could consistently become. Sometimes they suddenly become affectionate again after periods of distance. Sometimes they briefly open up emotionally after you begin pulling away. And those moments create hope that things are finally changing. But temporary emotional closeness is not the same as lasting emotional availability. And many people stay trapped in emotionally painful relationships because they keep holding on to small moments instead of looking at the overall pattern. You must stop falling in love with potential while ignoring reality. Because the reality is this: a relationship cannot thrive when one person fears emotional intimacy so deeply that they repeatedly disconnect every time true closeness begins to form. And if they are unwilling to recognize the problem, seek help, communicate openly, and actively change, you will spend years emotionally starving beside someone who never fully lets you in. Leaving an avoidant partner is not weakness. Sometimes it is the strongest act of self-respect you can make. It is choosing emotional stability over emotional confusion. It is choosing peace over constant emotional chasing. It is choosing yourself instead of endlessly waiting for someone else to emotionally awaken. And one day, after enough healing, you finally realize something powerful. Love should never feel like begging someone to stop emotionally leaving you. And that's the truth about avoidant relationships. Sometimes, love isn't enough when emotional availability is missing. If this resonated with you, take it as your sign to choose peace over confusion. I'll see you in the next one.